For those who don't know what EMDR is, it's a eye movement therapy. So it's a little bit awkward, but it's very effective. And
Hmm.
we use it for
Wow.
trauma. I have a lady who was agoraphobic, never left her house, and she did one session. And after 40 years of going through therapy, in one session, she was able to leave her house every day.
Have you ever heard of EMDR therapy? Well, I got to be honest with you, I didn't. And if you watch my previous video with therapist Greg Cintron, when he introduced himself, he launched into how his specialty is this EMDR thing. I had no idea what he was talking about. I was totally caught off guard, but I was really curious. So I went back around and asked him more questions about that. And that's what this video is about. In case you didn't see the original interview with him, I'm going to open this video with his introduction, replaying it in case, so you will have some context. But if you already saw that video, I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to fast forward past that, it starts here. Hey, Craig, it's so great to see you. Thanks so much for taking a little time with us today. Why don't we just start out and you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe share, who you are, what you do.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Greg Cintron. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am also an EMDR provider. For those who don't know what EMDR is, it's a eye movement therapy. So it's a little bit awkward, but it's very effective. And
Hmm.
we use it for
Wow.
trauma. So if you kind of look up EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, you'll find a lot on it because celebrities use it. I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting thing, but I've always used it for trauma. So helping people kind of take away the trauma attachments or the symptoms that come with trauma by going back into their memories and kind of rewriting their memories. So it's a very interesting kind of thing. It's
Really? I
yes,
think
it's
we're,
very
I hear another video coming.
yes, you could do a
I've
whole
never
nother
heard
video
that.
about
That's
that.
so
Yes,
fascinating.
it's very awkward to some degree. So like when people get trained in EMDR, a lot of people will not practice doing it because you're not doing a lot of talking. So your eyes are moving back and forth like when you're in REM sleep. And so your brain is way more active when you're sleeping. Your body's at rest. Your brain is a lot more open. And then they're thinking through these memories, not reliving them, just thinking through them. And so there's a lot of just, I stop the light bar, I check in with them, and they go right back to the light bar. But at the end of the day, in one session, it can take away. I mean, I have a lady who was agoraphobic, never left her house. And she did one session. And after 40 years of going through therapy, in one session, she was able to leave her house every day. It was like a miracle. And what was
Wow.
even crazier was I had only done EMDR like 3 times at that point. So I was just like, wow, this is really cool. It works. So I've started really practicing
I
with
can
that.
see
And
why you decide to go down that road after that
yes,
initiation with
right.
her.
Right. And I mean, the best part for me is just people who have significant trauma. They're some of the best people I know, right? So
Oh,
they're kind of the people you want, the good people in the world. It's like
yeah.
I want to alleviate that stress that, those things in their life. And so in talk therapy, I get a lot of satisfaction from growing and walking with them and getting to know them. They teach me a lot. I teach them a lot.
Hmm.
But with EMDR, they get better in like, 1 to 3 sessions, and it just depends on like how complicated their issues are, but they find relief. It's not like a night and day difference. Like they're like, oh, I'm so happy. I'm going to go win the lottery. It's more of, I still remember the person who passed away, but I don't have the panic attack that comes with it, right? I don't have the shame
Wow.
or the fear or the guilt or any of those things. I just have an opportunity to move forward with either honoring this person or whatever they decide to do. It's kind of up to them. So I always kind of feel a little guilty that I want to jump in and say something. And I always have to remind myself, like, nope, we're going to let the brain do the healing. So
Wow.
that's one of the main things that I
You
do
work with a
now.
lot of veterans, right?
I did, yes. I worked for the government for about 15 years, and I worked with combat veterans, military sexual
Wow.
trauma, and then bereavement. And then bereavement's just a fancy word for grief counseling. So I'll try to explain every interchangeable word there is, right? Because it's a lot easier to say grief counselor, but for whatever reason, we say bereavement counselor. Um, and so, yes, I kind of wore a couple of different hats, worked a lot with post-traumatic stress, depression, all the things that come with that.
So I just have one question with the eye thing. So is
Sure.
there a light and is it them doing they're doing that with their eyes? And are
Right,
they
right.
following a light? You say a light. You've mentioned a light a
Yes,
couple
yes.
times.
So, yeah, so we call it bilateral stimulation, which is once again a fancy word for just activating both sides of the brain. So you can do that with like holding, we call them tappers, but they just vibrate in your hands. This is what's happening when you walk, when your feet hit the ground. It's just sending stimulus, the central nervous system that's just going up when both feet hit the ground, all the way up to your brain. And that's actually how the person figured out all of this. What I love about EMDR is the lady who started it, Francine Shapiro, was not a clinician, right? Sometimes those are the best things, right? Because the clinicians, right, we kind of, when we want to stop seeing people and kind of doing the legwork, we write a book. And usually that book is just, it's not scientific. It's kind of like generalized and, just kind of what we learned in our practice. But Francine Shapiro was a woman who had cancer, and she would go to the park and she would try to move towards holistic and traditional medicine to fight these cancer treatments. And so what she found was when she was walking in the park, her thoughts came, she got like a lot of good insights and a lot of answers really fast, only when she walked this particular path in the park. And so she started to ask herself why that was. And what she noticed was is that she would be staring ahead down the path and there would be these trees swaying back and forth and she would watch them. So she brought that over to her cancer doctors and said, is there any kind of correlation between eye movements and the way you think? And they were like, of course, talk to the sleep people. And then so she talked to the sleep people, and they were like, yes, this is what your brain does when you're asleep. You have rapid eye movements. When you have rapid eye movements, you store memories. And so then she spent a lifetime studying what your eyes do in your sleep and how that would relate to like trauma or anything else, just basically self improvement. And so she couldn't move too far because she was a writer, and they were like, yeah, you can't just test this on people, right? You kind of have to get a degree. So she did. She got a degree as a social worker. And from the early 70s till just a couple of years ago when she passed away, that was how long. I mean, she dedicated her whole life to it. And now EMDR is considered the gentler, the kinder treatment for trauma because you don't have to relive anything. You don't have homework. And it's all your brain doing the work with somebody who's skilled enough to help you walk through that, right? And it's
Right.
the most effective treatment for trauma. Now, people use it for other things. Like I have people who say, I can't drive over bridges, or I'm scared to death of flying in an airplane. I have people who use it for business with their anxiety, addressing, anything really. There's so many practical uses for it. It's become kind of like a big moneymaker, but I use it for the premise that it actually was researched for, which was on veterans and it was with sexual trauma. And so that's kind of how I learned it. Now I'm doing this advanced thing now, which is just kind of learning more about like all sorts of different things. I don't want to bore you, but somatic pain and all sorts of different things in which it can benefit them. But that's only because I'm having clients come in and they have chronic pain. And so while they're sitting there, they're telling me about their pain, and I'll pull out a light bar because it's easier. I'll be honest. I used to just use my fingers, like back and forth like
Oh,
this. But when I started doing that with rape victims, they would get triggered with me just being
Oh,
close to them. So now I use a light bar, and I try to stick to eye movements, although my wife hates the eye movements. So I actually tap her knees with my hands. Um, and so, different strokes for different folks. Some people like to hear tones. I try to stick to eye movements because that was how they did the research in the beginning, and that was what was most effective. And that's what I find is the most effective. But yes, people do it on the computer. They have a program where a ball will move back and forth. And as long as the therapist can see your eyes going all the way back and forth, then that's what they work with.
hmm.
So yeah, it's not terrible. I've tried to do it on myself. It's like impossible, but I don't know why it is. I mean, I've tried, I've learned about it and then thought this is amazing. Had it done to me in the training, and I promised myself I wouldn't go on stage and cry like everybody else did. So I was going to think about a make-believe dog that I didn't have and just talk about how it died. And they started doing the eye movements, and I zoned out to something totally different. And when they checked in on me, there I was crying like everybody else. Um,
Wow.
but it was extremely effective. And what's crazy was the lady said, just think of something that bothers you. So it was going to be this make believe dog. But when she started doing the eye movements, something that bothered me came up. It was actually my dad. And then when we were done with the eye movements, I was so excited because I moved to this place where I saw my dad as this healed person. And I called my brother and I said, "You
Wow.
won't believe what happened. This is what happened to me. I feel great about dad." And then I noticed he was quiet, and I thought, "Oh, I just emotionally vomited on him, right?" And now he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not ready for this kind of thing." But it really, and that was just a practice for my training, and it really helped me so tremendously that I thought, how can I not practice this with my clients? And that's what I've been doing ever since. Been practicing
Wow.
EMDR for a good 8 or 9 years now. It's been life changing for a lot of people. There are some people that are just like, I don't notice anything. But I'm actually like, well, I haven't had anybody come back and say I'm worse from it. So I feel like it's a very safe practice. And there's been so many people who like night and day, 100%, just totally different. Um, so yeah, it's been wild.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. Thank you so much for sharing
yeah,
all about that. That's going to
yeah,
definitely be another
absolutely.
video.
Yes,
I hope you enjoyed that. I found it really fascinating. If you missed my first interview with Greg Cintron, you can watch that video right here.